Morning, guys. Mark Ferrasci with Protect Dog Training. Excuse the background. Sitting in the trailer, staying out of the wind this morning. The windstorm came back again. It was really bad for 2, 3 days. It was blowing like a banshee up here. Miserable when it gets that way. And then we're up, right below snow level, so it's cold. And so I got up at 7 o'clock this morning, as I always do, to go out and do my dogs and get everybody situated and get them into their kennels and scoop and do my normal morning routine with my dogs. And it's just miserable out there. So I'd already be out there starting to work dogs or doing whatever I needed to do to get ready for my day. And a lot of the time that is going out and training the dogs. But I have just posted a video with 2 weeks with Buddha being in. And I was giving an assessment of his demeanor, his temperament in general for the breed. And he's very pitty, very intense when he gets going off on other dogs and wants to go after animals. And it's something that I started talking about which is aversives and the old classic training methods we used to use back in the 70s. And there's little adages, they call it yank and crank, and there's other things. There's a guy that does a lot of videos and stuff, and he does a lot of media that he puts out that have kind of been a solid baseboard of the industry nowadays, because he is such a force in the industry as far as what he's producing and who he's working with Michael Ellis and other things. But he calls it yank and crank, and then he advocates not taking your dog to a trainer like me that does in kennel, that kind of thing. And I don't agree with him totally. I feel that the general public with a good trainer, and that's the question, with a good trainer has a lot of value with the trainer that's going to make sure that they get the education they need and they understand what they're doing in regards to contracting a trainer to do the work for them. But it's the education of the customer that matters more than anything. So we start talking about the old escape and avoidance training that was started with William Keeler. And if any of you guys know, and we're going to get into a little bit of history, because I always like to kind of educate you guys about the industry, because I've been doing this for a lot of years. I've got a lot of knowledge as far as where the industry's at today and where it came from and what transitions we've went through. So we now have gotten to a point where we're doing a lot of different methods with a lot more positive, with food, luring, motivational things like tugs and balls and all kinds of things that we use to condition our animals. And we've gotten away from, any good trainer anyway, has gotten away from the old classic avoidance and escape training, because there's so much negativity, and that is warranted. I mean, it's warranted because you can go out and you can yank on a dog and you get them to do the behaviors and everything, but where's the dog's head at in the work? I'm always saying that, right? And so every dog is different, and I mentioned that as well. So with Buddha, he is he's a hunter, okay? And he's very kind of pitty, where he'll bow up and want to go off on dogs and livestock and chickens and horses. And his family lives on a ranch. They have horses, they have chickens, they have animals, and they can't have this dog doing this sort of thing. And then his tendency to just right away, his whole genetic propensities, right? His normal behavior traits will cause him to just kind of float, and right away he smells something, he goes over. You're not really going to get through to that dog without using some kind of aversion, some kind of conditioning that's going to get the dog to learn and be conditioned to avoid these corrections and learning which way you do want him to go. And I can get into this a lot more. I was very good at it as a kid. I was very good. That's why you hear me using so much of my voice, so much of my body language and everything. It was what I learned to use to bring the dog's mental attitude up, because I didn't want a sad sack. If you correct a dog and you're not giving him the right things, he's not learning to come into the reward, and he ends up being pouting, and he ends up getting bummed out, and his belly's on the ground, his tail's tucked. You don't want to see that in an animal. So because of that, I learned, because that's all we did back then, and this is the only thing we knew, right, was to use the old classic escape and avoidance training. And it still works. And it's a very valuable tool to have in my tool bag if I need it. But being a balanced trainer, that's what I was trying to mention in that other video, being a balanced trainer, I only mix it in when I need it, and I'm using it as conditioning for certain key areas and spots. So with this example, if you ever go back and you read the Keeler, it's Kholer, I do believe, Kohler, William Kohler. He was a Disney trainer, and he was a movie trainer. He's very well known and very well respected. But he brought this to the forefront because he didn't mix any bones. In this book, he right away went charging right towards his philosophy of using this method in training, right? And it became something, because we didn't have the internet back then, it became something we were all doing, right? And so it became synonymous. In fact, I remember when we had the clickers starting to get more and more prevalent, and the working dog people, the people doing schutzen and doing bite sports and bite work, were very negative against it. There was a big upheaval, and they they poo-pooed it. Yeah, that's BS, that's this, that's that. And then slowly but surely they started to see the light, and they started to realize that it was a lot nicer and easier to use these tools to condition an animal with luring and with food motivation, etc. And it started to take hold. And now it's a big proponent in the dog training industry. It really is. And it's to the point now that if you mention any negative as far as doing any aversives or any corrections on an animal, there is such an upheaval with the PC crowd. Right, and then you've got other trainers that are even doing it today that have a lot more of the negative, the aversions, and using bonkers and everything that are totally looked on in a negative way, because they're advocating it so much that now their pendulum has swung the total other way, and they're trying to advocate this harsh training methods, and they're getting pounded, right, and rightly so. Okay, so I guess what I'm trying to do, and excuse the shaking on the video here because I've got it holding in my hand as I'm talking to you. So it's something that, again, it comes back to my philosophy of the yin and the yang and balance in training. Everything's about balance, okay? And that's why I love the name of a balanced trainer, because that's really what it denotes. It denotes that you have enough tools in your tool bag that you can bring whatever you need out in those certain key spots. So with Buddha, I'm doing the old right about turn and driving away from it with corrections, right? And they're pretty harsh. I'm trying to give him, because this being, his mental mind state goes into his instincts, and his instincts to float into food, and he shuts off everything else. He doesn't know it's even there because he's so into doing what he's doing. And partially it's because his owners didn't imprint him as a puppy with food and some of these other tricks that we have. And if they would have, I don't know if he would be this way as much, but it is still a distinct part of his mental makeup and his drive states in his world because of the breed, right? And the type of breed he is. A very stout, pity type breed. So what I will do, and going back to what I was doing with Aurora, with the environmental that I was working with her with the reactivity and stuff, you have to be very cognizant of threshold. I can't just go right up on a fence line and expect Buddha to not be responding to a dog that's lunging at him, going crazy, and then beat the hell out of him because he's doing that. That's not right. So you separate yourself away from that distance-wise, and you start making him realize by letting his brain float, giving him the opportunity to make the mistake, and then going the other way and give him a nice, crisp, done and over with type of correction. Timing is real important. Right away, have the motivational tool in your hand, food, whatever it may be that he's going to drive back in. So he starts to learn to want to avoid that correction. That's kind of how it's done. I can get into it really specifically if you were to come to take a lesson with me and everything. But it's very few dogs that I'm going to need to do this. Most of my breeds are Malinois, Dutch Shepherds are real common nowadays, Shepherds, cattle dogs. Those dogs don't need this type of work as much, and if even at all, okay? Because the dogs are a lot more responsive to other conditioning tools and other methods, right? So I want to make you understand that, because I don't want you guys to take the attitude that you think that that's all I do. I don't. There's only little key slivers of areas that I want to get the dog's brain to make sure that he doesn't float into this, and that he's responsive to responding, and you do it before he gets in there. You can't. That's why they always tell you when they're doing reactivity, you don't let the dog lock in their eyes and then start, and this emotional mind state is spiraling up, and then he goes off, and then you try to correct it. It's too late. Okay, you got to do it before the dog does it, and you've got to apply it properly. And it is an art. It really is. I felt that I was very good at it, and I look back at some of the dogs I've conditioned and what I've done. I was pretty darn good at it. But now I've got to try to transfer. This is a big key, because no matter what, this dog has to go back home to his owners, and they've got to try to keep on top of this training that I do with the dog, right? So because of that, I can only rely on them getting so good at what they're doing, because everybody's got a lifestyle. He's busy, he's a contractor, he's out doing his jobs, and so you've got a lifestyle that's going to get in the way of that. And then it's the person's personality, as far as how much is he going to be willing to commit to getting adept and good at doing these things he's got to do to keep the conditioning up, right? We're probably going to go to a stem collar with a dog. Don't think I'm going to be using it as punishment. I'm not going to be using it the yank and crank type of a method and trying to get him to want to avoid that. I won't use it in that way. I'll be using it, but I will be dovetailing it, which means the work that I'm doing with the old classic avoidance and escape training that I'm putting in certain key areas that I talked about in that last video, I will be kind of applying that, but I'll be doing it on just enough low intensity and teaching him how to turn it off, making sure I condition the dog into that tool as much as I can, right? And then it's all about his thresholds, because that's the whole thing with some of these breeds, man. That threshold is, boom, they spiral up and you're way past threshold, and there's no way you're going to end up correcting that dog to stopping that behavior. It's not conducive to him learning. He's not going to grow from it, and that's the whole thing. That's conditioning. So how you apply it is really important, right? I wanted to get into the subject because I want you guys to understand that there's still value in some of these methods they used to use in the old days, okay? There really is. But again, it's a yin and yang. It's a balance in everything you do. Balance is key in everything we do in training, as far as I'm concerned, and what I do, right? I want to keep the dog in balance so that you don't swing that pendulum and that's all you're doing is yank and crank, okay? That would be semi-abusive, right? It would be something that you wouldn't want to do as a good trainer, right? And so you only pull these little tricks out when you need them, but having that trick in the bag is important. There's a lot of kids right now that are going towards all positive, and they only understand that. They have no idea of understanding how to use pressure, okay? How to use pressure, how to get the dog, and how to condition the dog with that pressure that gets him to do the right thing, right? I was watching another trainer that I respect online, that I think he's in Canada, and he does a lot of Schutzen type dogs. He breeds German Shepherds, and he's real good, you know, and he was talking about using a stem collar and getting the dog to be conditioned into understanding how to turn off the pressure and how that works. And it was a good video. It was enjoyable for me because he's talking things that I understand, right? And he was showing how he conditioned his dog with a stem collar. So it's very important to understand the tools that we have to use are only as good as the person using it, and your knowledge base is very, very important. So like right now, that's all my mind is thinking about. One, getting the dog conditioned well enough that he's going to respond in the right ways for me, and then the work it's going to take to transfer this knowledge to the customer and their willingness to get off the couch and apply it and all that. That's all a factor, okay? I am really worried, and this is what I was worried about when I took the dog in and evaluated him in the very beginning. I didn't know what I was going to get. I thought when they told me they had a Dogo Argentina, I might have a problem dog that was going to be a major disaster because he was so set in. I ended up getting a dog that was really a cool dog, 6 months of age, has plenty of potential, and still had plenty in the bank to be able to work with. I didn't have to reverse a problem that they had created, and they bring me a nut at 2 years of age, you know. Dogo Argentinos are a lot of dog. I would not suggest this dog for all people. It's a dog that I would not really say that most people can handle, because he's going to spiral out on you, and he's a dangerous dog. And if you have an accident, it could be a major accident. You remember that interview I did with Leah, where that dog she was trying to work with it, and it came in at an older age, and it was a rescue that she was trying to work with, and the dog ended up going off on her and almost killed her. She was real lucky. She really was. So just keep it in mind that there's methods and there's things that we have in our toolbox that a lot of trainers may use, but it's all about how good is that trainer to be able to use these methods and do the right thing by the dog. Is very important, but to do the right thing by the owner, you know what I mean? And this gentleman is a perfect customer because he's had pitties a lot of his life. He's not adverse to some of these things. He understands what he's got to do, and he's at that stage now. He's nodding his head and he's saying, "Oh yeah, I love it, yeah." And then you get the natural instinct of a person. A lot of times they'll float right back to their lifestyles, and they don't put the work in. And that, when I work with a customer, is going to be the deciding factor. Do they put the work in? Do they keep following through? Do they keep coming back to me with questions and asking for help and looking for my guidance in working with the animals that I contract to train for them, right? Because believe me, you can do the best job in the world and that dog will be working like a top for you, and you give them back to the owners, and all these behaviors are going to slide right back downhill, and they're going to fall wherever that person's passion falls, right? How much work do they put in to making sure they learn and grow through this, and they stay on top of it, and they take the dog out, and they keep that build of relationship. Because in the end, like with Buddha, it's about relationship. I had to build my relationship to work with him and to train him. And then when I get done, that customer has to make sure that their relationship is in the right place. And if it's not, they're going to go slide right back to the same old dog and spiral up, and their genetic stamps, their genetic propensities, right? Their normal behavioral traits are going to come right back out, and you just pissed all your money away, right? And a lot of times trainers don't explain this to customers. They go out and they do their demos, and they've got their dog that's all fancy and sharp. They impress the customer, and they make their sale. And then when it really comes down to it, they haven't done the job that I feel they need to do with due diligence to make sure they're doing all they can to make sure they educate their customer and they get the customer to put the work in. Okay? Because in the end, if the customer doesn't put the work in and goes right back to his same old lifestyle, all the behavior is going to go right down the tube, and you just pissed all your money away. Okay? And most trainers won't tell that to their customers. Okay? They don't let them know that it's all about their relationship with their animal and all about how much they put into learning and growing and taking advantage of a professional educating them. Okay, and teaching them what they need to do to grow their relationship, right? So just a little bit of insight about that video, and I really hesitate to really talk about anything on the aversive sides and correcting dogs and doing any of that, because so many people are anti, and they want to jump you, and they want to start saying you're the worst trainer in the world and you're this and you're that without any knowledge. You know, the people's ability to be swayed by this little box that we have in front of them, and it's only limited by a certain amount of time, and it's only that little window into what they see is so small and minute it's not even funny, and they don't realize there's a huge amount of work that goes into it, and there's a lot more involved with the dog and with the training and with the trainer that they're working with than just this one little video that we're putting out on the internet. So keep that in mind. You know, it's important for you to realize that's just a slice. That's exactly the same thing the police feel a lot of times. They go out and they have a situation, somebody's got a camera and he films it, right away they're being all judged. It didn't explain the full factor of what happened. What did the call say? What is the person's attitude? How much happened before that situation happened? And I'm not justifying this. I'm not saying that it's right that you see some of the stuff that you see on video. It shouldn't happen. But at the same time, there's a lot more factors that go into it than this little slice, this little box that you're seeing right now. Okay, so it's real important for you to realize that. So get off the couch, do your R&D, learn as far as, especially if you were to go out and try to look for a service and you were looking for a trainer. Spend some time, find out, get some referrals, find out who he's worked with, who or she has worked with, find out some of the success stories. Don't just spend your money because the guy's pitching it and he's really good at being what I call a slick dick. Right? And I've got a guy down the way that I've mentioned a couple times. I don't like saying his name. I won't say his business name, but I really got upset about the person because all I did was go out and was like a shyster, be a good salesman and take people's money, and he had no clue what he was doing. Couldn't train his way out of a paper bag. Okay, so that irritates you. You know, you see that's part of our industry, though. Okay, so you as the public, you as the person that's buying the services and contracting, putting your money in this other man's hand or a woman's hand, you need to do your research. You need to figure out who they are and what their experience is, and learn enough that you don't just throw your money away, because that's what you're going to do if you don't go with the right person, right? So I thank you very much, Mark.